Does that mean that you may be seeing a path back to the public sector?
Well, I do spend some time advising on the types of policies that are going to have maximum impacts for investors.
This clip just says it all, because he says the quiet part out loud.
Everyone knows Mark Carney stole the riding of Nepean from previous MP and Liberal leadership candidate Chandra Arya. However, a lot of people don't know who Carney is running against, and they should. Liberals like to talk about resumes. Well, if it came down to that, Conservative candidate Barbara Ball's resume should win by default.
Let's take a look. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the resume of MP candidate Barbara Ball. Now, Barbara, you can look all the way at the bottom here. She was in law enforcement with Halton Regional Police Service from about 1997 until 2001. Okay, fine. Well, then she is registered as a field artillery officer for the Department of National Defence in the Canadian Armed Forces from 1992 until 2002. That's over 10 years in our armed forces, folks. Then she chose to go back into law enforcement, and she served as an inspector, police officer, and staff sergeant. So this is somebody who has dedicated virtually their entire adult life to service. Service for their community, service for public safety, and service for Canada in the armed forces. Now, when I first heard that Barbara Ball was in a field artillery unit, I just thought, that's awesome. That is frickin' awesome.
I think that's badass is your exact word.
Well, I was trying to be somewhat parliamentary. So, but yes, that's what I said. Badass. Like, field artillery. Wow. I am not making light at all. I have so much respect that she was in a unit like that. But the fact that she chose to go into that type of service, that says all you need to know about somebody who wants to then continue to serve in Parliament. This is someone who has been in very tense situations, who has faced down criminals, potentially faced down deadly enemies, and she continues to serve. This is somebody that I would gladly throw my hat behind when it came to a federal election. And she's the one that is running in Nepean against Mark Carney. Now, Mark Carney's resume is full of banks and it's full of investment firms, all outside of Canada. So he has spent about 25 years of his adult life outside of Canada. And all that has done is enriched himself. That's it. And those of his buddies. Let's be honest here. So that's Mark Carney's resume. And people want to stack those up? Really? Okay, sure. But here's the thing. Barbara Ball, she has been trying to run a very above board campaign, a high energy campaign, and a campaign with integrity. Unfortunately, her opponent and his team doesn't seem to be playing by the same rules.
Hello, Nepean. It's Barbara Ball, your Conservative candidate. In a democracy, the right to free speech is sacred. It's common knowledge that the Barbara Ball team is very organized. Our signs were up very early in the campaign. Many of our wooden stakes are marked with blue tops and NCA for Nepean Conservative Association written on them. Now, we are discovering that hundreds of our signs are missing. We have found many of our signs in the garbage. We have also discovered empty holes and, in other instances, wooden stakes with blue tips and NCA written on them, bearing my opponent's red sign. When people resort to criminal behavior, they are undermining the democratic process itself. This is unacceptable. Our community deserves better. We must stand united against such actions, which tarnish the democratic ideals that we hold dear.
So it would appear that what she's suggesting is Mark Carney's team is destroying her signs, removing her signs, or literally ripping her sign off of the mounts because they can't be bothered to use their own, and putting up Mark Carney's sign instead.
Now, to play devil's advocate and to be perfectly fair, we don't know that's the case. It could just be random people taking Liberal signs and putting them on the stakes that belong to the Conservative Party.
It's possible. It's possible. But
there's so many signs missing. You heard Barbara, she said over 100 signs.
well, she's saying hundreds.
Hundreds, well, multiple hundreds.
So this is not just a few folks. This is not just like one or two people, doing something. What she's suggesting here, and I don't blame her, is that this seems like a coordinated effort if you're trying to deal with that many signs in terms of destroying them, ripping them down, or putting yours up. Now, this isn't the first time we've heard of this. I think we talked about this the other day on the live stream where when I was out door knocking, we found a case where we knocked on someone's door where they had a Liberal sign in the front yard and said, yeah, can we count on your vote? And of course, thinking, we were either going to get a door slam in the face or, a polite rejection. And they said, yes, absolutely. We were kind of surprised at that response. And when the person was asked about the sign, because he said, we're just surprised because you have Chad Collins' sign on the front yard. And they said, yeah, I don't even know how that got there. So you have some very interesting and sleazy and shady tactics being employed by people, whether it's the campaign teams or Liberal supporters or both.
Maybe just people looking to cause trouble. The thing is, we don't know, right? Now, here's some tips that if you find a sign on your front lawn or on your property that you didn't ask for it to be there, it's not a party you'd like to support, just call the campaign office who that sign belongs to and they will come remove it for you, or at least they should. And if you do see somebody destroying signs or taking down signs that they shouldn't be, make sure you call your non-emergency police number, whether that's your local police or RCMP. Don't call 911 because it's not an emergency. It's considered like a non-emergency crime, but it is a crime. It's destruction of private property, and the police should be aware.
Right. So in Barbara Ball's case, you have scenarios where there's potentially hundreds of crimes being committed because that private property is being destroyed.
Well, and I know I don't need to tell you guys, but as Canadians, we should respect our neighbors' rights to support whichever political party that they want. I'm not saying you have to understand why they're doing it, but we have to respect that that's their choice and they have a right to express themselves.
Right. So that's what's going on in Nepean with Barbara Ball. And so she's having a rough go of it, but you've seen her resume. This is not somebody who's going to be intimidated by some signs being taken down. This is not somebody who is going to get frustrated and succumb to despair. This is someone who is just going to fight even harder in order to try to win that seat and oust the Liberal leader. Speaking of the Liberal leader, the more we learn about Mark Carney, the more we just shake our head. I swear. And the more we find out when he says certain things, it gets crazier by the minute. So we know that in the fall of 2024, in September, it was announced that Mark Carney was going to be the Liberal financial advisor, basically. And he was going to head up this financial task force. But he was only the only one on the task force. So he was going to head it up. And then shortly after that, he went to China. He went to China in October. And during that trip, he had a couple of meetings. Talk to a president here, lobby a mayor there, secure a $250 million loan there for the company that he was about to leave. But anyhow, so that was his trip. And then in November, he spoke at a conference. And in that, he talked about many things. But he said something interesting in response to a question, or rather a couple of questions, that should really, really interest Canadians. Let's take a look.
If funding, which is now increasingly available, or capital, which is now increasingly available, is the second step and policy is the first, does that mean that you may be seeing a path back to the public sector?
Well,
policy?
I do spend some time advising on what, again, pro bono, but advising on the types of policies that are going to have maximum impacts for investors. So I'll give you an example, which is one of the issues. It's not the biggest issue. It's like 2% of global emissions. You wouldn't know it from the headlines, but 2% of global emissions is for air travel, emissions from air travel. Now, so the question is, are we going to have green, sustainable aviation fuel? What's happened in the UK, the EU, is they've said to major airlines, look, if you're flying in and out of Heathrow or wherever, you have to have 10% of your load has to be sustainable aviation fuel by, I think it's 2030. Consequence of that policy has been to convert some entrepreneurs in Texas, in this case, a company called Infineon, to become economic. Because all of a sudden American Airlines, British Airways need to buy that fuel. They'll pay a green premium. You've got an offtake, that's high credit quality. And so in that case, we Brookfield put $1 billion to work there, and it's a fantastic opportunity. The point being, without the policy, the policy has to drive it and drive things down. So yeah, I'm dodging your question.
I know, I know you're dodging.
And look at the time.
I look at the time. 20 minutes left. We have all the time to come back to this.
That was cringe.
It was cringe, but it's interesting. This was on November 16th of 2024. And what have we been saying? We've been saying that it's interesting that Mark Carney went to China and then shortly after that immediately abandoned his position as the chair of the board of Brookfield Asset Management, and then decides to run for the Prime Minister of Canada. So isn't that interesting that after he's back from China, he's asked about this question, and he's asked about if he plans on returning to public service. And he does this coy little, trying to be cute little non-answer, but also admits that public policy drives the market and must drive the market in order to provide maximum return, his words not mine, maximum return for investors.
Well, and I think that's particularly important because Canadians don't know what's currently in Mark Carney's portfolio.
Right.
We're heading to an election where we're voting potentially for this man for policies that may or may not make him even richer. How is that right?
And we don't know what was discussed by him with the Chinese. But what we do see as early as November is that he was obviously thinking about returning to public service. And he was obviously thinking about influencing policy or changing policy in order to maximize return for investors.
Do you know what is just perhaps ironic about this whole situation? If you had told the Canadian people that it was Pierre Poilievre who was refusing to let Canadians know what's in his portfolio and you would potentially be voting on things that could make him richer, everybody would be absolutely livid. Like, he wouldn't be leader of the party anymore. People would be absolutely outraged. But because it's a liberal leader, Canadians are looking the other way. And I don't think the mainstream media is helping the matter any.
Well, I would say that Canadians that are on the fence or voting liberal are looking the other way. But
well, most of us, not most of us, but many of us do know better.
Right.
We understand what's at stake here, that again, we could be voting for policies that will make the Prime Minister even richer.
But this clip just says it all, because he says the quiet part out loud. He's not talking about making Canada a better place.
No, he's not at all.
And he's not talking about, what might happen if Donald Trump, does what he says he's going to do. Because at this point, the, you know, it's I can't even talk.
I can put it into words. I think it's that Pierre Poilievre wants to serve. He says it all the time. We, meaning him and his caucus, are servants, not masters. They want to serve the Canadian people. They want to make Canada a better place. They want to take it back to the Harper era, where we had the richest middle class in the world. Mark Carney just wants to make himself and his friends richer.